Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Solstice transmission. Um, for those who might be new to me, my name is Michelle. I'm an astrologer, and this is, my gift to my community, my students, those who are here watching this. It's really just an opportunity for us to tune in to the themes that are completing in this particular time and season. And I think that this solstice is particularly charged with an energy of getting into the ground of where we are so that we can recognize where we're going. Because if you look at the transits for 2024 or even beyond 2020, 2025, 2026 especially, there is a sense of huge transformation. I've already received, the download of my program for next year. And I think the entirety of my energy is moving into what this particular year is calling us to. And it's really the rebirth, death cycle that is a profound culmination of lifetimes that we've lived up to this moment, and a final sort of settling in to the ground. It's almost like the image I get is going from, you've been digging, your house was destroyed. You've been digging out the bottom of the ground around the land to begin rebuilding. But you're not yet there. You're still sort of dealing with a life of, uncomfortable restructuring. And at the same time, where we're going is going to be laying the foundation. You're literally going to be pouring concrete and developing a sense of identity, structure, purpose, service to humanity. But it's not yet, right? And we can't really fully serve in the ways that we're called to serve until we've gotten out of the ways that are no longer working for us, right? It's like we can't move into the next phase from a space of fear, desperation, insecurity, where those places of oppression and depression and suppression have limited us from accessing our full potential, right? And the depression may be really, really strong at this point, because with any evolutionary cycle, it always gets darker before it gets lighter, right? It always gets more intensified before we cross the bridge. And if you look at what Jeffrey Wolf Green taught about the evolutionary stages, right, that can point us to where we are. And a part of where we are on this solstice is 0 degrees sun. Last night, when the sun moved into Capricorn, at the very same time, the moon moved into Taurus. So we had a solstice chart that was Earth trining Earth, first quarter trine, with Mercury retrograde conjunct the sun, which is its inferior conjunction, the cazimi. The coming together of Mercury and the sun marked the midpoint of the retrograde journey. Now, the rest of Mercury's retrograde will be in the sign of Sagittarius until it stations direct at 22 degrees Sag. And then, it'll come back. So it's going to make a square to Neptune, which it already did once. It'll come back and square Neptune again. So this theme I've spoken about in my week aheads a couple of times, of like really feeling the illusion, the disillusionment, the questions around belief systems. we're also in these coming days with Mars moving towards that same square to Neptune. And that Mars square to Neptune comes with the Mercury conjunction. So it's a strong time of like really seeing the crisis of consciousness relative to how we've felt either connected or disconnected to our faith, to our path, to the divine. You know, part of what I've been facing in the last couple of days here in preparation for this pilgrimage to France, where I received a calling to go to the tomb of Mary Magdalene, to the place where she's said to have spent the second half of her life following the resurrection of Jesus. She was said to take a boat to the south of France and then live in this mountainous region of the south of France, and her remains are there in this monastery that's a Catholic monastery entirely devoted to her. And I received a calling to go to this monastery, and I'm being accompanied by a dear beloved friend who has done this many times, and really feeling the call to open this space to a retreat, to prayer, to practicing, and when I read the website of, you know, the Catholic, where they speak about the trip that Mary Magdalene was making, they speak of this particular pilgrimage as being the answering of the call of soul, right? And what is the call of soul, right? The call, as it relates to evolutionary astrology, Pluto speaks to the bottom line desire for the soul to return to source, and where we also hold separating desires, the desire to separate from source. And we come into this physical incarnation separated from source and have this strong, deep longing. And I would even go so far, this isn't what Jeffrey Wolf Green says, but this is what Michelle says. I would go so far as to say that the longings and the core desires of our soul in the lifetime are the essential desires of separation and union, right? So, and we can tell by the way that they make us feel. We can tell if this desire is separating me from source, if I feel fear, anxiety, despair, grief, anger, you know, not to say that negative emotions are bad or wrong, or that we're wrong for having them, because ultimately what those emotions do is they point us back into the desire to return to source. We want to feel love. We want to feel connection. We want to have intimacy and partnership and love and union that is reflective of the divine love that we're also seeking. We want to feel the abundance, the nature of our Creator to create and support us and give us everything we need. And to the extent our life experiences, our circumstances, our family karmas, the dynamics of our soul are manifesting one or both of these realities. The separation from source, which I think only leads us back to the desire to return to source, and the unifying desires, the desires that unite us with our source. And right now we have Pluto at the end of this Capricorn transit, essentially a part of this rebirth energy that we're working with, right? Rebirth is the name of my program that will be essentially my core teaching for 2024. And it follows the line of this core work that we have to do in order to be one with our source, right? In order to shed the past, in order to step into the full essence, our vulnerability, our gifts, what we're here to bring forward. I want to see if I can find them. I had these. I received a download about that. I probably won't be able to find it right now. about the 3 stages of evolution. Oh yeah, here we go. Caterpillar, the stage of evolution marking stability in the known, right? And as Pluto's been working towards the end of Capricorn, that stability in the known has become more and more unstable, because we're culminating the end of the destruction, the transmutation of that known stability. And you can see Saturn is the ruler of that Pluto, right? It is in a mutable sign, already is moving forward into really pointing us to where we're going, which is we're going somewhere in 2025 with the nodes of the moon in Pisces and Virgo. That's where I actually think what's happening now is more about where we're going then, which is a completely different reality. But in order to get there, we have to have a breaking apart of that stage of evolution where everything is marked by this stability in the known. And then the cocoon phase is the phase of dissolving, distilling, letting go of the familiar. And in that part, we are not yet what we are becoming. We are becoming what we're becoming. We have inside of us what is already meant to be, but it's not actualized. So if these are gifts, if these are talents, if these are skills, if this is a way of living, if this is a way of being, if this is access to a relationship, a kind of relationship, we're not yet there yet. We haven't even become who would be able to be in that relationship. But we're there in the dissolving and the letting go, right? And you can see too, we get to the end of this culmination of Venus in Scorpio. She's been moving through this dark sort of underworld journey. And all of this comes together in February when Pluto, Mars, and Venus conjoin in Aquarius, right? That is the new ground that is being built. But that stage of evolution, so that's butterfly stage, it's the stage of emergence into the new or into the unknown. And in a new phase, it's unfamiliar to us. And it requires a lot of what's happening right now, which is this shedding of beliefs, this shedding of ideas, this dissolving of the forms and the structures of our life that have provided stability, this dissolving of the internal mechanisms that have, kept us fearful, betrayed, abandoned, distrustful, this slow internalized realization around what is truly valuable and where we find our value, and the breaking apart of the places where we haven't stepped into finding value in this new emergence, right? There's still, I imagine like the caterpillar has some point where it's like, oh man, shit, I really wish I hadn't gone into the cocoon, because I somehow, some way, even though it was not where I wanted to be and it was limiting me, it seemed to be safe. It provided me an identity that I could be grounded in. And now I don't have that anymore, but I have no idea what I'm becoming. Or maybe there's some sense of becoming, like, I think on a soul level, we have a sense in our soul of who we are. And we're in a process ongoing of just remembering that sense. If you know yourself to be love, to be the essential connection to your divine source, if you know yourself to be created by an all-loving, all-encompassing, unifying energy, you wouldn't see yourself as separate from anything. But on some level, we know that, you know, and even in spiritual circles, that can be a great way of bypassing the places where there's a lot of fear, unforgiveness, jadedness, hurt, right? The North Node is in Aries, moving towards Chiron. We can't escape looking at and really feeling and really understanding where the roots of our source of separation lie. Do they lie in the belief systems that we held? Do they lie in the way that we've thought about our lives? Do they lie in the things that we've been taught or we've been conditioned? Do they lie in the way that we sort of are operating to be what we believe other people want us to be because that is safe and familiar? Because the unknown feels like such a breaking, right? There's a fragility psychologically and emotionally. We can have, when people receive, you know, or have a download or, you know, have a moment of awakening, it can seem like a psychological break from reality because it's a break from the conditioning that has kept us in a state of fear. And it can be liberating and feel really beautiful and amazing. And at the same time, it can be very, it's like, what's the word? I just keep seeing Eckhart Tolle sitting on a park bench. Like all of a sudden you're not doing the things that other people are expecting you to do. And so it's uncomfortable for others because you're not participating in life as they know it. It's uncomfortable for you because you know that you can't really participate in life as it was. But this emergent part of ourselves is really working towards blossoming. And in the new phase, right? In the new phase, we don't have sight. It's like the dark time of the moon, in a way, the new phase conjunction, because we're maybe more in touch with the past and with what's unresolved in our life than we are in touch with the future. And that's why I think this particular solstice is such a powerful turning point. Because if we are where we are and we really steep into what is it that we can do, because evolution is going to happen regardless, right? A part of my creating an intentional containers in working, it's like in growing together, we're intentionally working with actualizing in our core purpose. And in love evolution, we're intentionally working with the Venus-Mars dynamics within relationship. And I think next year, rebirth is it. And in a way, it's just one thing. We are actualizing in purpose and in relationship to ourselves. The soul is being reborn in a fundamental way that has to lead us to a new life. It has to lead us to a new expression of self. It has to lead us to a new identity. But we can't skip the phases, right? You can't skip the releasing of what's known and familiar. You can't skip the dissolving and the letting go process. And you get to enjoy and appreciate and take full energy of the emergence that comes. And so there's this step by step, you know, and this, I think, this 0 degrees Capricorn moon with a 29 degree, you know, it's kind of like marking the caterpillar's last dance. It's saying, here we are, right? Pluto's going to make its way over the next couple of months, if you follow, and we'll be following this, into Aquarius very soon, right? January. And then it's going to get in the early degrees, first 2 degrees, further than it got before. It's going to station retrograde. I'm going to go all the way back to 29 degrees and station direct in October. And then we're going to get all the way back to 0 degrees. So by this time next year, solstice time next year, Pluto will be officially and formally and foundationally in a new evolutionary sign. And we'll spend the next 20 years in the sign of Aquarius, moving through Aquarius, initiating everyone who's got, strong Aquarius placements, initiating all of the fixed and, so the polarity point for Pluto will be Leo, initiating this core structure of our identity. And so we're here in this moment now. And what the moon and the sun are saying to me is that in this first quarter trine, it's like looking out at the ground of our lives and saying, okay, I don't know what's yet to grow, but this is the ground upon which I'm building from. Everything's been demolished. Maybe there are some things yet to be demolished, right? Pluto will go back all the way to this 29 degrees Capricorn. Let's see. The shadow degree is 2940. So let's see. That is, there we go. January 10th. Right. So right around this Capricorn new moon. And I really feel like that lays the foundation. We've got Mercury direct by that Capricorn new moon. We've got, pretty much every planet, Jupiter stations direct, except for Uranus is direct at this point. It bears well for what we need to do in order to move forward, being ready within us at that time. And it bears well now for us to really use this deep energy of hibernation, the final energetics of internalizing and really looking at, okay, this is the structure, this is the framework that I have built my life upon. A part of what I've been doing is going back through my journals and really taking note of all the messages that I've received. And, looking at all the goals, looking at all the things the desires that I have, right? This is a really perfect time to go through those desires. And I would say if it's a longing and it's strong, if it's so strong that there's despair and there's grief and there's, if it's an inkling of a way of being embodied in yourself that you haven't yet wired in, this is the real time to get into the heart of that, to really get into what are the beliefs, what are the ideas, what are the attachments that I have to let go of, right? Because the longing is not wrong. It's the attachment to the longing that I have learned over the last year has, like, if there's attachment there, it really keeps it at bay. And a part of facing the grief or facing the feelings, facing the deeper needs and desires is really also facing where we have to release those attachments in order to come into receiving, in order to come into actually following. If there's strong stories about the limitations of our body or our health or our age or our whatever it is, right? those are the stories that have to be examined. If there's strong conditioning about whether or not you're good enough to do what you feel called to do, whether or not you're worthy of what you desire, these are the things that we have to get into, right? Venus has to look at all the darkness as she scrapes the bottom of the barrel, right? She has to look at all the stuff and see not how it is limiting her or shaming her or, but how it is liberating her, how it is helping her to move on from something that was meant to go at a particular time, right? Everything we let go of, everything we lose, even those things that are beloved to us that we don't want to let go of, they have a time. There's a time where everything in the cycles of life comes to an end. There was a time for you to be born, and there will be a time for you to pass. There is a time for things to come into our life. Like astrology, really, in terms of the predictive nature of it, is simply timing and cycles. And people over thousands and thousands of years looking and seeing, oh, this was the time when the sun was furthest from the earth. This was the time when the sun was closest to the earth. This was the time for when we would harvest. This was the time for when, and marking the time of a soul's birth became a way of marking in time the comings of creation. And we have this time. This is a time of a coming of creation, but it's something coming from deep within us. It's something coming to a culmination where we're learning how to listen, how to slow down. One of the things that has come up for me in recent is like in my marriage, I would receive information, intuitive guidance, and I felt so unsafe to share what I was knowing that often I would just leave my husband out of those decisions, out of those impulses. And one day I walked into work, I had the knowing that today was the day to quit my job. I was really deeply longing to become a financial advisor. I had been working in a very difficult banking environment. I had to overcome so much resentment and opposition and a lot of struggle in the environment that I was working in. And one day it just occurred to me, like, this is the day, this is the moment. Here I have to walk in and quit my job. And so I did, but I didn't tell him. And he called at lunchtime just to check in on me, just to see how my day was going. And they said, oh, Michelle doesn't work here anymore. Totally freaked him out. And it didn't even occur to me, right? Because I had become so protective of my inner intuitive guidance. And here I am in my relationship. I'm planning this pilgrimage, and I really feel like I'm doing whatever I can to listen deeply and be in devotion to what is calling me. And there's a part of me that's afraid to share that with him because I'm afraid of his judgment and he recently shared a lot of judgment and fear about what we were doing. And I noticed this part of myself, this little girl. I saw myself, this makes me want to cry. Like I saw myself on the train platform in France, feeling lost and not knowing where I'm going or what I'm doing. Why am I there? And this part of myself that wants to protect the guidance that I receive, because I don't know that the masculine or that the outside world or that, the others, whoever the other is, right, can understand it or, and it's been a huge source of growth for me to share my voice on YouTube, to share what I receive and to share the messages I receive, because a lot of what I feared was actually like sharing myself in that way. And so many of the women that I deeply respect and love on YouTube are anonymous, including, what I would call one of my primary mentors. She doesn't reveal her identity. You don't know her name. You don't know where she is, who she is. She does readings, she does sessions, but that's how she chooses to relate to, the whole, and she's a channel and a guide. And so I've been facing these parts of myself, these old parts, while continuing to lean into what it would be like to share what I'm receiving, what I'm knowing, and I do that every week by sharing the week ahead. I do that in my transmissions by allowing what comes through to come through. I do that in sessions by trusting more and more what I see in the natal chart and allowing, the strength and the confidence of that to build in me. And there's still vulnerability in that. And I was able to touch in with this young part of self that it was like very deeply vulnerable in taking these steps, because this is the first time I've ever done anything like this, to leave home, to answer the calling, to go to a foreign country, to take my family, my children there, everything, to organize it so that other people can join me in this. And simply because I'm answering the call to prayer in devotion to the feminine who was awake at the footsteps of Christ, to the feminine who knew herself and eventually stepped into being an apostle, being a teacher, right? And this is the calling that we have in these times, really, in the darkness, in the deep periods of fear, in the places of insecurity within our own selves, in the dissolving and disillusioning of our life, and in the deep longings and desires, and where our soul is torn between resistance and cooperation, between desire and longing, and what seems to be the lack or, absence of its fulfillment. Right? I see that as like a cardinal cross, the cardinal cross of Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, Libra, right? Our desire and longing, right? And then the fulfillment of our resistance, our desire to separate from source, and our cooperation, our desire to be joined, to come together. Right. And I'm pointing to cooperation relative to the South Node, because that is the resolution node relative to Pluto. That is where we're resolving the skip step that Pluto is in the square to the nodes right now. And it's all ruled by the Saturn in Pisces, our devotion, our, the path that we are choosing to walk, which no one, even if we do come together in union, the extent is that the soul is always going to be walking with itself, even as it's walking with others. So there will be people who come in and go out. I've seen that in my teaching. People come in and join me for a time, and they're very, very present, and then they go out and they go on their way. And that's a part of the cycles of life. And then they come back in, and maybe they're, and really what my calling is in this next year is to just go in and go deep and go all the way to growth, to rebirth, to the other side of this, and to do it as a container for learning and deepening in astrology in a profound way. So it feels like, okay, what we're still dealing with in this solstice, though, is the necessary introspection, the necessary involution that happens. And it's sort of like the caterpillar sort of looking at itself and looking at its life and saying, well, I think this is all that there is, but I'm pretty sure I feel something else is there. I'm not sure what it is, but there's just enough willingness to say, okay, maybe there is somewhere else that I'm meant to go. Maybe there is another way. Maybe there is a new relationship that's meant to come in. Maybe there is, you know, an invitation for me to actualize in my career in a way that I have never done before. Maybe there is a way for me to align my values to my life and let go of all the things that are no longer serving me, bit by bit, just like sloughing off skin, not like peeling yourself down and like punishing yourself, but just bit by bit, just saying, this, I'm ready. This can go now. Like I've been dancing with the whole caffeine, and it was hard to wake up this morning with not feeling well. And there's still a part of me that feels like, oh, I want to have that caffeine in my system because the headache from the not caffeine on top of, but it's like, it's a dance. And a part of what I've learned about letting go of things is that the dance of letting go is as important as the act of letting go itself. The process that we go through in our healing journey is as important as the healing itself. And the healing can come in an instant, just like letting go can come in an instant. People can be addicted to substances of all kinds and have a moment of clarity, a moment of awakening, a moment of letting go. We can be in relationship for, just like my job situation. I was in that job for a decade before just like the day of clarity came and it was done. And it was done. And I never went back, never turned back. And then I built an entire business on the transition of that day because I let go. And then I left, and my friend Nina called me and she was like, I'm going to San Francisco. You want to come with me? And the rest was history. I met my first client. I built my own bookkeeping practice. I ended up building a full service practice in a very short amount of time in San Francisco, and then selling my business to another bookkeeper who happened to be another, manager from the bank who also left to pursue his own business. And he, to this day, works with those clients and still is doing that work. Like it was all meant to be. And the timing of it, I could not have predicted. Right. And that's oftentimes we're looking to astrologers, and guides and people to tell us what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and there's some wisdom to looking at the chart and looking at what's alive and what's happening through the transits and seeing, but it doesn't necessarily, like the present moment is the greatest predictor of what your experience is. And coming back to that again and again can be a welcome release from trying to anticipate things that we can't anticipate. And then we can look at what is the core calling of the soul. What's the core calling of Pluto in Capricorn? 29 degrees Cancer, tenderness, vulnerability, returning to the mother, returning to the great inner space of our own nourishment. And so I picked a card for this transmission this is from the Animal Apothecary deck. It is by far Cara Elizabeth. She's one of my favorite Instagram people. If you follow her readings, just super spot on. And she does a lot of work around transmuting our trauma, the things that have hurt us, into gold, into gifts. And I really resonate with that. Like that is the journey of the soul. We're transmuting the illusion of separation from our source into the return of knowing ourselves as who we are created to be. That's the journey. So the card I got was Nourishment While Waiting, and I'll read this to you. Baby Hawk. Hawk is a power bird with a big medicine. Hawk is fearless, the visionary, the messenger, the balanced one. Hawk is your higher self. Baby Hawk in this image represents the part of you with an overwhelming desire to step into who you are fully and fulfill your purpose. Mouse represents the nourishment baby hawk will need to develop into her most fulfilled self. Baby hawk teaches us the wisdom of nourishment while waiting. This is a moment of patience. What will you do while you wait for your vision to manifest? The flower blooms in its own time, but the gardener cultivates the seed's growth. The gardener ensures the seed's fullest development by nourishing it, pulling the weeds that threaten it, and planting the seed where it will receive the most sunlight. While you wait for your next step to be revealed, you must similarly prepare yourself for success. Baby hawk needs to be nourished before she can achieve all her greatness as an adult hawk. And this is why you must nourish yourself on every possible level. Ask yourself what skills your future self holds that you currently do not have, and then start practicing them. I think that's one of the core things that we'll be doing in Rebirth next year is just practicing skills, developing skills, stepping into. Then start researching and practicing them. Once you grow and develop these skills, your step into your highest self will emerge. Wise old hawk looks back on her past self and shares the medicine, not just to wait in patience, but to learn while you wait, to stay persistent on your path towards growth, and develop and strengthen yourself. For it is constant nourishment to become your greatest self that magnetizes you towards dreams unimaginable to you now. Yeah, may that be so, right? Nourishment while waiting. What are we going to do in this dark time? Nourishment while waiting. So with that, I'll offer a little prayer, concluding this transmission. This time of the solstice is a tipping point of light and dark. And we may feel as deep and into the darkness as ever before. And yet in this point is the change towards the light, is the rebirth of the soul into who we are truly meant to be. And so as each of us listening to this recording, to this message, is finding our way with where we are, finding our way with what feels limiting, what suppression, depression, struggles, what past conditions we have yet to transcend. As we're finding our way with that, may we also find ways to nourish ourselves, to learn and deepen and practice and grow with who and where we are, to allow the voice of the soul that is calling us, longing for us to return home, longing for us to know ourselves, to emerge in the space of this darkness and be illuminated, to be seen by ourselves and to be supported by others. And may we call in the support to nourish ourselves, to be able to care for the deepest parts of our being that are scared, that are tender and afraid, just like the baby hawk, and be given the nourishment and the protection of the nest that we're in, of the place where we find ourselves, of the ground where we are, knowing that this will change, knowing that our lives will change in this year ahead, and that this fallow time is our preparation. May it be supported by all that we are to reach the version of our highest selves, to reach the version of ourselves that is becoming, emerging, beautiful and strong, capable, and with her gifts and her medicine, with his knowing and his strength and his divine leadership inside, right? Masculine and feminine united as one, as equals. The union, the coming together of the source, the spirit, and our physical selves, the vessel of our being. We give it all up to our Creator, who is knowing us more deeply than anyone else on this planet, who is guiding us always, who is caring for us always in all ways. And with this, our class is complete. If you have any questions or anything you want to share on the recording, feel free to unmute yourself. I will make it possible for you to do that. And otherwise, if not, I give my blessings to you in this time of great transition. And I thank you for joining me live. For those, and if you're watching the recording, you can always leave me a comment in the video and just let me know how this impacted you, or send me an email. Let me know how you're doing. Love to hear from you always.